How's everybody doing this week? So this week we're going to go ahead here and play Esper Ketramose in basically the blue black blink list. I am splashing blue with some slight changes. We'll go over the list here real quick. 20 lands, but we're also playing two Witch Enchanters and one Bogot Troller. So technically we're at 23 lands. We're playing no Vials in this list. So the list is 4 Ephemerates, 1 Dark Blast. Dark Blast is a decent card and it combos with Frog and Ketramose. If you have enough life and your opponent's tapped out and it's safe, you can pretty much combo off with Frog, Ketramose, and Dark Blast. Moving on, we have 4 Fatal Pushes as our removal. We have 2 Thoughtseize. Most lists play this as a Spell Snare, but Spell Snare is great in the format right now, but I want to try Thoughtseize instead and be a little more proactive rather than reactive, and it actually felt pretty good in our games. 2 Relic of Progenitus, we're using this to trigger Ketramose plus its graveyard hate. 4 Failure, 3 Emperor Bones. After playing with Emperor Bones, I think you could go up to 4. This effect is just very strong in this deck, and it's good against a bunch of other decks in the format, so I could see taking this up to 4. Then our blue splash is for Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog's just a solid card, and then it obviously combos very well with Ketramose. You'll see it come up once or twice where we're just top decking. We have a Ketramose in play, we hit a Frog, it's late game, we exile a bunch of cards, we draw basically a whole brand new hand. Flicker Wisp is in. Flicker Wisp is an odd card, right? It looks like it's slow, it's an X1, so it's not super great, especially if Bowmasters is around. With that said though, Flicker Wisp can get you out of some situations. It didn't come up in the games you're about to see, but I had an opponent, Eldrazi Tron, try and lock me out with a Ensnaring Bridge. I was able to Flicker Wisp it, play it, blink their Ensnaring Bridge, and swing for lethal. So it just gives you some things like that. Also, I had it where a opponent had a Chalice of the Void on 1, and I couldn't cast my Ephemerates. I had 3 Ephemerates in hand. They were completely dead. I was able to blink it with Flicker Wisp that comes back with 0 counters on it, and then freed up my Ephemerates. Obviously, Failure can do the same thing there for the Chalice, but Flicker Wisp, I think, into 2 of is solid. Bogot Troller, it's a land that exiles cards. From graveyards, we did have it where I had 6 mana, I went Ketramose into Bogart, draw a card. Witch Enchanter is a solid card. Some lists are up to 4. I can see anywhere between 2 and 4 being correct. Next up, we have Solitude. Solitude is just a solid card, especially with Ephemerate. Get to exile a bunch of stuff. We had some matches you're going to see where we lost just because we didn't see a Solitude. We were super unlucky, to be honest, because I think there's 24 cards left in deck, and we had only seen 1 Solitude. And then next up, we have Overlord of the Balemark. Card's solid. Blink it, all the card advantage. So pretty generic main list. Sideboard's also pretty generic. We have 4 White Orchid Phantoms. We're just really bad against Eldrazi and things like that, so this pops their lands. Aven Interrupter is more graveyard hate and can stifle opponents' cards that they have on the stack. 2 Wrath of the Skies. This card does come up. We play against Boros Energy. This card's solid against them. 4 Consigned to Memories. This is like the best card to play in blue for the sideboard, and one of the main reasons we splash blue. Eldrazi is a rough matchup for us. So it's good to have. It's also good against Teamer Breach. And last up, we have Graph Digger's Cage. Doesn't really turn off any of the things we're doing, but hinders any of our opponents trying to do graveyard shenanigans. So anyway, we'll go ahead here and get into the games.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
Alright, here we are for game 1. I'm going to be very upfront. This entire match is pretty quick. So we'll go ahead here and start it off. We win the die roll. We choose to go first. Go ahead and keep our hand here. We end up mulliganing to 6, but I didn't think we could put this back. I didn't want to mulligan too low. We had a Surveil land and a Frog. We surveil a land to the top so we can go turn 2 Frog. We had push for any of our opponent's creatures. We had Balemarks to get us more card advantage and Emperor Bones against graveyard decks, but our opponent is on... sorry here. I'm just still laughing at our opponent killing us here on turn 2 with Titan. So anyway, we're up against Titan here. They had the nuts on turn 2. Just to be clear, this is a turn 2 Titan that they proceed to kill us from with double Amulet. I'll let it play out here super quickly. I assume it's going to go fairly quickly here. But anyway, it's kind of wild. I didn't think we could die here. I mean, it didn't matter. We didn't have anything in our hand here to stop this from happening. It's not like we misplayed. It is worth noting, if I had known we were up against this, I might have mulliganed to try and find a white card in Solitude. But we were already on a Malta 6, and like I said, I think this hand was good against most of the format, having a removal spell, Double Frog, Overlord the Balemark to filter us into more cards, and an Emperor Bones. But it is obviously not good when you're up against a Titan combo deck. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead here and fast forward. I don't know if you want to see us die. But anyway, I let my opponent go through the whole iteration here, right? And they end up chewing up something like 10, 15 minutes of their own clock doing this. So if you ever want to see a Titan turn 2 and do all the shenanigans, this is for you. All right. Anyway, as you can see, opponent does all the things here, and we end up dying to give their Titans haste here, and then they swing and kill us. I'm not going to make you sit through this. I'll see you back here for game 2 of this match.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, we're back here against Titan for game 2. So as you see sideboard-wise here, I cut a Bogart Trawler, an Emperor Bones, a Dark Blast, two Fatal Pushes, a Ketramose, a Frog, and 2 Relics. Most of this, I kind of was just cutting the edges here with Frog and Ketramose. I just wanted more interactive cards. Same with Emperor Bones. Fatal Push can obviously come up and be important, but we do have Solitudes. Cards I did bring in, I brought in 1 Wrath of Disguise. I brought in just 1, as if they get down multiple relics, we can sweep them up, but I didn't want 2. It's kind of a side case that might happen. Brought in 4 White Orchid Phantoms, which is obviously solid here, and I did bring in 4 Consigned Memories. So let's go ahead here and get into the game. Obviously we lost, so we win a die roll. Unfortunately, can't keep the first hand, can't keep the second hand due to land issues, and then this hand is questionable. We surveil, we see another White Orchid. So basically all we're doing here, the whole game plan here that we have going on, is we had a land, we surveil into another White Orchid, we have Witch Enchanter, which is going to come in, deal us 3 damage, and then be our second white source. So basically right now all we're doing is White Orchid into Ephemerate to kill all their lands, and then hopefully we draw another white card. If they can manage to get through all that and resolve a Titan, we have Solitude. So this hand from mold to, 5 is not completely hateful. So anyway, we're going to go ahead here, shock in the Witch Enchanter, play the Phantom, they go get a basic. And our opponent has double Urza Saga here. Then we draw the Thalia, which is phenomenal. Means we can keep blinking these White Orchid Phantoms. So unless our opponent can deal with both these Phantoms, we should be good to go. So it is worth noting here, coming up, we untap here. We have a Shadowy Backstreets. Ideally, this would have been an untapped land, and then we could ephemerate a White Orchid and then flash in Thalia into turn. Since our opponent's only on 2 mana, and even next turn at best, they can go up to 3 mana. They shouldn't be able to do anything too crazy. So I go ahead here, play our land, surveil, and pass, with the idea that we're going to flash Thalia in to end the turn and start blinking our White Orchids. We surveil, see a Consigned Memory on top, even better, so we obviously keep it. Our opponent goes Spelunking. That's obviously fine, nothing we can do about it anyway. And then we go ahead here, flash into Thalia into turn, and I'm pretty sure our opponent concedes here. And that's it. So we got turn 2'd, and then our opponent concedes on turn 3. So super interactive Magic here. I'll see you back here for game 3.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, here we are for the last and final game of match 1 against Titan. We obviously won the second game, so we are now on the draw. Didn't like that hand. Again, we mulligan down to a total of 5. It seems to be a recurring trend against this opponent. Our opponent has turn 1 Amulet. See, we die here on turn 2. On the upside, we are holding up Consign. Our opponent is just doing Titan things. And a turn here, we're going to go fetch Surveiling. Opponent goes Spelunking. They have Urza Saga in play, so they will have 2 Amulets on their next turn, which is terrifying. We go surveilling. We see a failure, not what we're looking for. We draw another Overlord. Unfortunately, we can't play anything here. So last time we died on turn 2, and our opponent was setting up to have the same thing. Obviously, our opponent's hand would have to be perfect here. But I didn't want to go tap out for Frog or an Overlord. We could have went for Overlord, hoped to find a Solitude. Goodness, I'm sorry. Go find a Solitude to hold up so we could pitch Ketramose and Solitude to Titan. But anyway, what I decided to do here is I consign their Urza Saga trigger so they don't go search up another amulet, hoping that would slow them down. We did get lucky, and it did appear to slow them down some. We go surveilling again, see an Emperor Bones, not a card we want. We draw a consign. I decide that they probably can't kill us next turn from this position. So I go ahead here, resolve our Balemark. We get lucky, find a Solitude. So now we have Solitude up. If we can untap and have consign in Solitude, we're starting to make a little headway here. Luckily, us consigning our opponent's consigning our opponent's Urza Saga. I'm getting ahead of myself. We consigned our opponent's Urza Saga, so you don't go get another amulet. Seems to be doing pretty well. It is worth noting here I do punt. So this is a punt here on my part, right? Luckily, it doesn't end up hurting us. So right here, our opponent plays Aftermath Analyst. So when they put it into play and they're tapping this to make mana, before they do this, I should Solitude here. If I do that, our opponent has to sack 2 lands and they'd be down to either just a Field of Ruin in play or one other land in play. Unfortunately, I missed this timing. So they get to resolve their Analyst, which is horrible for us. We do manage to pull it out, as I'll show you. But this was a misplay. With the untap on the stack, I should have Solitude here. So, like I said, it is a misplay. So anyway, our opponent starts going off. They get all their lands into play. Start doing Titan things. I'll be honest with you, our opponent does misplay back here. So their misplay here. All right, so here's the misplay. As soon as they did this, I knew the game had ended. So if you look here, our opponent is Summoner's Pacting. They have 6 mana. They're going to play Titan. But if you look, they don't have any green mana. So we're just going to consign the Titan's trigger to go find lands. And then they're going to die to the Pact in their upkeep. So anyway, our opponent goes, casts Titan. They have no green sources. I consign the trigger for Titan, so they can't go get two more green sources. And then obviously they passed me, I'd pass back, and they died to their Pact. So not super fast game 1. They killed us on turn 2, and then we just kind of ruined their game plan both times. So I'll see you back here for match 2.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, here we are for game 2. We lost a die roll. Opponent chooses to go first. This hand's a little sketchy from us, but I think it was able to an okay keep. You'll see I do keep some sketchy hands. I'm not entirely sure what we're looking for here. I'm used to control decks. This opening hand seemed okay to me. We have a removal spell. We have Overlord to go search up a creature that we want. We have Relic for Graveyard Hate and an Emperor Bones and 3 lands. So I think it was a keep, but again, I'll try and show you more of my opening hands as we go on, as some of them I feel like are slightly questionable. And if I knew the deck a little better and got more reps in with it, I'd have a better idea. Unfortunately for us, our opponent looks like they're on Jeskia Energy, which is a horrific deck for us. We're not playing Aether Vial, which lets us cheat things into play. So it's probably a terrible matchup. And then our opponent plays an Doorkeeper Thrull. This card is, if you haven't seen it, it's kind of horrifying for us. It just means creatures entering don't cause abilities to trigger. So all of our cards are turned off for the most part. So it's kind of horrifying. With that said, obviously Failure still works. Balemark, when it flips, still works, and Emperor Bones attack still works. Luckily, we do have this Fatal Push here. And it is worth noting, I did feel like I messed up here. When they flash this in end of turn, before I had passed turn, I should have Fatal Pushed this, because now they're going to have up Counterspell possibly for this Fatal Push. So that was a punt on my part. So I shot this in, because I'm going to play Emperor Bones. Nothing going on right now. I was trying to force a counter spell out of our opponent's hand, so you're going to see me bait with some spells. So Emperor Bones here is just a 2/2. If anything ever gets into the graveyard, we can hopefully use its ability, force our opponent to do something. So right now we're racing. We're technically winning this race. I hate jamming cards here because probably just jamming them into counter magic since our opponent's not playing anything. I do go ahead here and jam a Balemerk, which they do counter. So they go ahead here and tap out. So they fetched, went and got a Surveil land. So basically they were tapped out of any counter magic. The only thing they would have left would be Force Negation, doing it in my end step. So it was a risk I was willing to take. I assumed if they were willing to Force Negation and pitch 2 cards out of hand, going down to 2 cards in hand, I was probably okay with that trade. Fortunately for us, it just goes ahead and works. Our opponent has the Arena of Glory. They go ahead and Prismatic, ending away our Emperor Bones, which is just fine with us. And now we're both down to 3 cards in hand. Again, we just go Surveilling here. We see a Ketramose. We go ahead here and keep it on top. It's like a must answer card for them. See if they have another counterspell in hand. Unfortunately, they do. If they had not had it, obviously Relic in play with Ketramose would have been solid along with Emperor Bones. Our opponent goes here and Wraths of the Skies for 1. I go ahead here and just pop our Relic of Progenitus to draw a card. Oh, I apologize. I did not. So I was going to pop a Relic of Progenitus, but I end up not doing it as it would wipe our own graveyard out. And then if our opponent did follow up with Flage here, I guess it wouldn't have mattered, but I did not pop the Relic because I didn't want to get rid of our graveyard, unfortunately. So our opponent goes Flage here. Our opponent has 0 cards in hand, which is phenomenal because we have this Emperor Bones here. Go ahead here and exile their Flage, which is great because they did have the Arena of Glory in play. And at this point, we're just kind of going to town. So here what I do is I use Emperor Bones. I exile our Overlord Balemerk. And then I'm going to adapt our Emperor Bones to get our Balemerk back to get more value and swing for 9. Unfortunately, our opponent has another Doorkeeper Thrull here, so we don't get the ETB of our Overlord here, but we do get the attack trigger. Go ahead here and get back at Ketramose. And then I go ahead here and just jam the Ketramose as our opponent has 0 cards in hand. And to turn our Balemerk gets exiled, we draw a card off Ketramose. And at this point, our opponent's in a pretty rough spot. So go ahead here and jam the Psychic Frog and just start exiling cards from our graveyard. It is worth noting I try and keep some relevant cards in the graveyard, such as our Balemerk. So go ahead here again and exile, draw some more cards, and I go ahead here, and I'm pretty sure, I was going to say I thought I Flicker Wisp here, but I do not. So we go attacking here. Our opponent has an Otawara to bounce back our Ketramose. Otawara actually comes up in a couple of our matches today and is actually a really strong card against us. Opponent draws another Flage. The funny part about the Flage here is this is the problem I ran into when I played this deck. Thrull turns off ETBs, so it's cool that Flage comes in and gets haste, but you don't get the 3 off it coming in. So yeah, they get to haste it and they do get to deal 3, but they're not gaining 6. So anyway, they go ahead here and swing. This is kind of all just for show at this point. Go ahead here and block with Ketramose, because Ketramose is indestructible and I gain 4 life, and then our opponent concedes because they're dead on board. So anyway, good showing here, game 1. I'll be back for game 2.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
Alright, here we are for game 2 against Jeskia Thrull. Sideboard, I sideboarded really light, so I took out 1 Flicker Wisp and 1 Dark Blast, and I brought in 2 Wrath of the Skies. I just wanted a way to answer Doorkeeper Thrull if it resolves, because as of right now we only have 4 Fatal Push. Solitudes I was obviously turned off. The rest of these I didn't know how I felt about it. Wake Orchid I don't think is great. Consign off also isn't great. Gravedigger's Cage I was on the fence about, but I also didn't think it was always phenomenal. And then even Interrupter isn't bad, but at the same time it's 3 mana, and I'm not really sure that's what I want to be doing against our Jeskia opponent. So we're obviously going to be on the draw here. I keep a super greedy hand here. We have triple Frog. Frog's pretty good, right? It requires an answer from them. We have it one land, which is slightly sketchy, but we have a draw step and we have a surveil. So I'm hoping in 3 cards that we can hit. Opponent goes shocking turn 1, and we get super lucky and draw the land off the top. So like I said, it was a high risk, high reward hand here. We obviously go surveilling here, end of turn. See another land, we obviously want to keep it. And go ahead here, jam our Frog. It resolves. Shockingly, there's no Galvanic Blast, end of turn. Opponent plays Stacked Prison, which I'm fine with. So then we go ahead here and we just keep jamming Frogs. So hopefully eventually one of these will stick. Opponent goes Island Cycling, end of turn for a Hollowed Fountain. And unfortunately, we know what's coming here. Our opponent lets the Static Prison go away, so we get a Frog back. So obviously, we know we were getting Wrath of the Sky there. Nothing we can do. Our opponent is down to 3 cards, which is something. We see yet another land on top. We keep it. So here I go Emperor Bones. I don't want to run my last and final Psychic Frog out into a counterspell, as I want some type of card advantage. Our opponent goes ahead and lets us Emperor Bones get back Psychic Frog. We adapt it, and then we attack with Psychic Frog and Emperor Bones. I'm sorry, Emperor Bones just came in, but we go ahead here and attack with Psychic Frog. Trying to draw a card here. Like I said, I didn't want to risk jamming our Psychic Frog into a counterspell, so this kind of did the same play, plus got us a 4/4 into play. Our opponent does go Dress Down in our attack step, which is nice because our opponent, if you don't know, usually likes to play Dress Down in our end step, so it's in effect until their entire turn, and then they can jam things like Flage and things like that, and then they don't have to sack anything, that or a Null Drifter. So them playing that there is kind of a win for us. And we still have a 4/4 left on board that they eventually have to answer. There's a Galvanic Discharge. Our opponent is now down to 2 cards in hand, and then we draw a Bailmerk, which is just super solid. We run the Psychic Frog out first, as I'd rather have that countered instead of our Bailmerk. We go ahead here past the main phase 2, and we jam the Overlord, and they flash in a Doorkeeper Thrull. So it's kind of unfortunate. Unfortunately, our opponent did mess up there. Doorkeeper Thrull was not in time for our Overlord, so they had to consign the Overlord trigger. Then a Wrath of the Skies clear our board. That is something I did not realize. So this is my first time playing with Overlord the Bailmerk. I didn't realize, I assumed when it was on the board it would count as 5 mana. I didn't realize how Impending worked, that it counted as 2, so if you Wrath of the Skies for 2, it somehow kills Bailmerk. I don't know. It was a weird interaction that I didn't know about. So anyway, our opponent's down to 0 cards in hand. We have a Frog and 4 cards in hand, and we just draw Ketramose. So this game is slowly coming to an end here. We play the Ketramose, exile a bunch of unimportant cards, and basically draw a whole new hand. I apologize, Moto is running a little slow here. I think our opponent was messaging me. Yeah. My opponent's taking a little bit of time here. They got a little upset that I had drawn a total of what, 3 frogs, 3 or 4 frogs, 4 frogs. They were complaining that I drew 4 frogs in the top 19 cards of my deck. Or if this ever moves forward here. And I'm pretty sure our opponent just concedes here. Sorry, opponent is still messaging in chat. So anyway, we proceed to win here. Our opponent's at 0 cards in hand. We go ahead here. We exile one more time, leaving 1 Frog and 1 Bailmerk in the graveyard, and we draw 2 more cards. And we're up to 6 cards in hand, and our opponent doesn't have any real way back into this game. So anyway, I'll see you back here for game 3.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
Alright, we're back here for game 3. We lost a die roll. Opponent chooses to go first. Obviously, this hand is one of those questionable hands, right, that I was talking about earlier. My thought process here is we have a Thoughtseize to take whatever their main game plan is, and they also mulligan to 5. So Thoughtseizing an opponent on 5 seems pretty strong. We have lands, we have a Surveil here. With the Ephemerate, if we find anything good in an Overlord. So hopefully we can Surveil into something good, and then Overlord gives us some looks too. So that was my idea behind keeping this land. Our opponent goes and shocks, gets Sacred Foundry, plays a Guide of Souls, and our opponent's on Boros. We go here, Thoughtseize. Opponent reveals a Ajani. We take the Ajani and leave them with a Thraben Charm and Sacred Foundry. They go ahead here and shock in their Sacred Foundry, leaving them with Thraben's Charm and one unknown. I was debating what to do here. I think I end up just jamming the Overlord Balemark here. Obviously, we know you have the Thraben Charm, but I just thought getting the value off of it and making them spend one of their cards in hand wouldn't be too bad. Go ahead and we find a Ketramose off of our Balemark. Our opponent goes attacking with her Guide of Souls. I will tell you ahead of time, this matchup is kind of infuriating towards the end. You'll see our deck just kind of peters out. I'm pretty sure we win game 1 here, but in the later games, our deck just does not fire. So our opponent goes attacking, we flash into Failure, and then we go to block. Our opponent goes Galvanic Discharge, we Ephemerate the Failure, so I feel it's important to keep around. We block, kill their Guide of Souls. Our opponent's down to 1 card in hand, and then they go ahead here and pack it up, which I think is fairly reasonable, as they're going to untap and have Ketramose up with a Failure in play. Our opponent was down to 1 card in hand, so I think that was a reasonable thing. I'll see you back here for game 2.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, we're back here for game 2, match 3 against our Boros opponent. Sideboard wise, it's pretty straightforward. We cut Turelga of Progenitus. I know it's good against their Titans, but we have Solitude, so hopefully we can answer any Flages that become issues. And we brought on 2 Wrath of the Skies, as Wrath of the Skies is obviously a house in this matchup. Our opponent's still going first. And our opponent mulls again to 5. And the funniest thing about this is our opponent mulls to 5. We keep what looks like a very strong hand, right? Emperor Bones is decent. We need a couple things here, but we have Surveillance, so it looks solid. We draw Thoughtseize again. We go turn 1 Thoughtseize. So this is our opponent's reveal. They had double Ajani and Thraben Charm, Sacred Foundry. Our opponent's really good at drawing these exact cards. I'll go ahead here and take one of the Ajani's. That's questionable. I can understand taking the Thraben Charm. Since they have 2 Ajani's, I can't take them both, and they're legendary. I could leave them go. But my fear was I didn't have a super great answer besides pitching for a Solitude to answer Ajani. So what they could have did is just went Ajani turn 2, Ajani turn 3, and I'd be forced to Solitude, exiling the Ajani with the trigger on the stack, because they could legend rule themselves, and a cat would have died. So I decided to take one of the Ajani's and make them find a better way to turn on their Ajani. Opponent goes Surveilling. And they keep card on top. They shock it in, play their cat, pass back to us, and unfortunately we drew 3 of our Surveillance. So we're not playing a whole bunch of anything here. Opponent goes attacking, they had to take the beats. Our opponent goes Galvanic Discharge on their cat. I go Solitude, exile their Ajani. Now with that said, obviously they don't have to pay any energy to kill their cat, but I wanted to get the Ajani off the board. So we go ahead here, play our Emperor Bones, we go Surveilling, see a land, put it in the graveyard. Go ahead and exile their Ajani. Unfortunately, as you see here, we're kind of petering out. Our opponent draws their 3rd Ajani. At this point, we're just kind of taking beats. I don't want to trade off my Emperor Bones here, as we have a Solitude in the graveyard. We go Surveilling, see a Balemark. We keep the Balemark. I exile Solitude with our Emperor Bones. I bring it into play. I Solitude away their other Ajani, and then I go swinging. My opponent goes Surveilling into turn. It is worth knowing we know they have a Thraven Charm in hand. They go Thraven Charm, go ahead and kill our Emperor Bones, and now we're just in a rough spot. There's only 5 cards in exile at the current moment. We go fetching here just to thin the deck. We play an Overlord. And then our only options there were Emperor Bones and Psychic Frog. There's no other creatures in our graveyard, which is kind of wild considering we're 19 cards in. Opponent goes attacking, and then they draw a discharge, yet another discharge for a frog, so we're kind of under a clock here. And we draw our 3rd Ketramose, so we go ahead here and play it. Like I said, our deck kind of fails us here. I'll be honest with you, all the matches you're going to see going forward, our deck kind of fails us. Like I said, we're 20 cards in, and we've seen, I think, 3 creatures. So it's kind of rough. Nothing we can do here. Literally, there's no interactions I can have here. And then our opponent has the perfect nuts. So, you get to see another card. So our opponent had 0 cards in hand. And they draw another, they draw Goblin Bombardment so they can sack both their creatures and Domus for 2. So our opponent mulled to 5 and definitely got there. So, yeah. Definitely a feel bad game. Anyway, I'll see you back here for game 3.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, here we are against Boros Energy for the 3rd and final game for all the marbles. We obviously go first. This hand is super sus. This is one of the hands I told you about that's a little questionable, but I thought was reasonable. So we have only 2 spells and 5 lands. With that said, we have 3 fetches, so we get 3 surveils. And then obviously Wrath of the Skies is a phenomenal card against our opponent. So go ahead here and keep. Our opponent molded down to 6. Our opponent was just not able to find very keepable hands, apparently. Opponent goes turn 1, Guide of Souls. Perfectly fine with us, right? We have Wrath of the Skies. So we go surveilling. We see a Balemerc. We keep the Balemerc. Go ahead here and jam the Balemerc. Now, unfortunately, our only hit we hit is a Boggart Trawler. And we mill over a Fatal Push and a Wrath of the Skies. Like I said, this matchup was a little bothersome because it does not go well for us. So our opponent has another Ajani, as they always have Ajani apparently. We do draw a Fatal Push, which is nice. We go ahead here, just kill their Ajani a while. Keep the board kind of clear. Next turn, if they play too much, if they overextend here, we will Wrath of the Skies, clear up their board. They have an Ocelot Pride, which is great for us, so we're definitely going to untap and Wrath of the Skies for 1 here. Go ahead here, and I'm a little scared. I'll go ahead here, end of turn, and fetch a Plains. Obviously, we can't fetch it with our Polluted Delta. Our opponent had basic Plains, which I think was a natural draw. They didn't fetch us. But I was afraid of Blood Moon, and we already had the Swamp, so I thought it was incidental for us to go get our Plains here, just in case our opponent tries to punk us out the game with a Blood Moon. We go shocking it in, and then I didn't need the Shock that there, which maybe comes up later, as you'll see. So anyway, I probably should have did it for 1 and kept the extra energy up. Our opponent has yet another Thraven's Charm. Our opponent between the Giants and Thraven's Charms is doing pretty sweet. And then our opponent, this is where I started to get a little salty. Our opponent goes Season Pyro, which is fine, right? I mean, we're still okay. So he hit double Balemerc. So now this is questionable here, right? For me to go ahead here and play Ketramose. The idea here with Ketramose is I can Boggart Trawler next turn and exile their graveyard and turn Ketramose on. Our opponent has yet another Season Pyromancer and then just has the nuts. Just the absolute nuts. So our opponent goes Season Pyro, Season Pyro, Season Pyro. And then has Stag Prison to answer our Ketramose. So at this point, my play of having Ketramose in play, Boggart Trawling their graveyard, and then having Ketramose live as a 4/4 blocking indestructible lifelinker is now off the table. And we're at 9 life up against 2, 4, 6, 7 power. So we're on a 2-turn clock. I go fetching, surveilling, so we need something here. We find a frog. I'm like, a frog does something. So go ahead here, and so this is slightly questionable, right? Like Overlord, I played Overlord. We could have either went Bogart Trawler, played Bogart Trawler, exiled the graveyard, and then also played Psychic Frog. And had 2 blockers up, but I was hoping that Overlord would find us something. We've seen 0 Solitudes. Mind you, we would have to hardcast it as we have no white cards in hand, but it was just not meant to be. We have not hit anything of decency. So we go ahead here and mill. The only cards, mind you, we have 13 cards in trash, and the only creature we have to target is a Psychic Frog and a Flicker Wisp that we just milled. At any point we saw a Solitude with the Ephemerate, it'd been great. I go ahead here and Flicker Wisp, blink our Balemark, trying to stabilize here. Yet again, Balemark comes in and triggers, and still no Solitudes. We hit another Frog and an Emperor Bones. So things are getting a little dicey here for us. We do have 2 blockers. The problem is we're going to trade off these Seasoned Pyromancers, but then they kind of just replace themselves, but it's kind of what we have to do here. We're down to 5. Our opponent flashes back their Seasoned Pyro, and at this point, I go into tank. So I'm in the tank for a hot minute here. You don't see it since we're watching the replay. Let's try to decide what the plan was here, right? So we'll go ahead here. I'll just play it out. But there were lots of things available to me. It's just worth knowing we have no Solitude and no lifelink in the graveyard. So go ahead here, play another Overlord, hoping to hit a Solitude. We do eventually hit a Solitude. So now here's the play, right? I can not attack with Overlord, and just play down a Thalia or an Emperor Bones or a Psychic Frog as a blocker and have 2 blockers up, but then we take 4 damage, we go to 1. So my play here is I go ahead here, I Overlord again with the idea of buying back the Solitude that we just milled over. So go ahead here, swing again. I buy back the Solitude that we finally milled. Mind you, that's the first Solitude we milled. We have 25 cards left in deck, and we saw 1 Solitude. 1 Solitude and 2 Ephemerates, which are just super strong in this matchup. So anyway, we go ahead here and pass. Go ahead here and play a land. I think we're going to need all the lands that we have available to us. Opponent still has 1 card in hand. Opponent goes attacking. We take this, we block. So the idea here is we're at 1, which isn't great, and I didn't want to use the Solitude because we can either hardcast the Solitude next turn, or we can invoke Solitude, exiling our own Balemark and gaining 5 if we have to. So anyway, we go ahead here and we do mill over a Dark Blast. I don't want to do the Dark Blast, so I go ahead here and just take a draw. It's Thoughtseize, which is a trash card that we obviously can't cast. So go ahead here, cast Emperor Bones. And this is where this turn here was rough. There's a bunch of different plays that I could do. My biggest fear was our opponent rips a Flage and can dome us for 3. So I'm just trying to put bodies into play and reduce the number of bodies that they have while still holding up a Solitude pitch to exile our Balemark. So what we have to do here is I'm going to go Emperor Bones. Again, we hardly have anything of value in our trash. Like, we have 2 Psychic Frogs and a Thalia and a Flicker Wisp is all we have. We have no other Solitudes. We don't have any other great plays. So I'm going to go ahead here, Emperor Bones, get back Flicker Wisp, play Flicker Wisp. I'm going to go ahead here, flicker my Balemark. Just trying to make a wide board here. Go attacking with Flicker Wisp. Dome them for 3. So now I'm feeling pretty good, right? Like, we're stabilizing. They have 4 cards in play, 4 attackers in play, and we're going to have 3 blockers. So we're going to have to pitch our Solitude into our play. We just need them not to hit a Flage. So again, we go ahead here, come to our Balemark triggers, and we don't hit anything of real relevance. We hit another Thalia, we finally hit a Ketramose and a Psychic Frog. We're down to 20 cards in deck with only, 2 Solitudes? 1 Solitude and 40 cards. Our opponent goes flashing back Season Pyro here. I'm like, okay, we still have a chance. And then our opponent goes surveilling, and they hit Flage. I can't. There's nothing I can do about this. Unfortunately, that's just game. I think I did the best we could here. Like I said, we really need another Solitude. There's 3 Solitudes. And then our opponent has even wilder. They hit the Galvanic Discharge, which definitely kills us for Xaxes here. Like I said, just a wild turn of events for us, unfortunately. I don't think there's anything else we could have really did there. You have to let me know in the comments if you think there was another play we had. Opponent goes attacking. We obviously block. We take 3. They flash back Flage. We do obviously invoke here to gain delay from our Bailmerk, but then we're exactly at 3 for Xaxes for Flage. If our opponent hadn't ripped the Galvanic Blast or had not milled over their Flage, we definitely stabilized there. But unfortunately, it is what it is. We'll see you back here for round 4.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, here we are for round 4. Opening hand is slightly sketched. This is another one of those hands I told you about that's questionable. We had 4 lands, 3 spells, Ephemerate, Frog, Solitude. I think these cards are pretty decent by themselves. And then we had 2 fetch lands for 2 surveils. So I think it was a reasonable keep. You have to let me know what your opinion is. Unfortunately, we draw 1 of our surveil lands, which is kind of rough. Our opponent goes surveilling with their own Undercity Sewers. So at this point, I'm not sure what our opponent's on. Our opponent bins a counterspell, so at this point, I'm pretty sure they're on like Frogtide. So go ahead, surveilling, see yet another land. So we go ahead and pitch that. We draw a Thoughtseize. We go ahead here and Thoughtseize. So let's go back here and look at this Thoughtseize real quick. So our opponent has Fatal Push, Persist, Unearth, Darkslick Shore, Scalding Tarn, and Inoculus. So I go ahead here and take their Fatal Push, as that's their only way to interact with our Psychic Frog. Obviously, they can hardcast an Oculus, but if they hardcast Oculus with their fetch next turn, they have to tap out and we can Solitude it. And to Solitude it, they're down to 2 Unearth and Persist that don't do anything, and hopefully our Psychic Frog can take over the game. So that was the idea here. Our opponent does exactly that. They fetch with the Scalding Tarn and they jam their Oculus. We obviously go ahead here and just Solitude. So there's Oculus. I go surveilling, see another Thoughtseize. I put it in the trash. I go ahead here, exile their Oculus, untap Jammer Frog. I shock in the Hollowed Fountain, so we have up Ephemerate just in case they draw. In case they draw like another Fatal Push, we could Ephemerate the Psychic Frog in response. Unfortunately, our opponent draws their own Psychic Frog, which is probably one of the best rips in their deck. And then we continue to flood here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 lands so far. Opponent blocks. We get into a pitching war. We have more cards in hand than they do, so they give up the fight. We see a Bailmerk on top. We keep it there. Our opponent Thought Scours themselves, and then they unearth their Frog. So now they're down to just a persistent hand. Since they're at 1 card in hand, I go ahead here and swing with the Frog. We draw another Frog. We go ahead here, play our Bailmerk. So we go ahead and get her back Solitude, and then we play a Psychic Frog. Opponent goes Thought Scouring. Unfortunately, they hit an Archon with their whole 1 of Persistent hand. Pretty bad for us. Go ahead here and Solitude the Archon with the trigger on the stack. Unfortunately, we had to go sacrificing a Frog, which doesn't feel good. I thought about sacking the one that wasn't tapped, but they have 2 cards in hand, and that one wouldn't be great for us, as they would have a Frog left and we would not. So we're just kind of in a race here. See who hits better, which is not a good spot to be. So we go ahead here and hit Ember Bones, and I just go ahead and play out the Failure. Just play all of our cards out. Opponent gives our their frog flying. And unfortunately, at this point, we're falling very far behind. It's Fatal Push, and that obviously means they have another kill spell for Thalia. And then unearth their other frog, and at this point, we have lost the game. We go ahead here, draw another card. Like I said, at this point, it's kind of unfortunate. A couple of these matchups you're going to see, I feel like our deck just missed. I go attacking, hoping to hit something good. We hit just yet another land. I think we've seen about half of our lands so far. A little over half our lands. So opponent finally hits their third frog. And at this point, we draw another land. Well over half the lands in our deck have been drawn, and we just go ahead and pack it up. I'll see you back here for game 2.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
Alright, here we are. So real quick going into game 2, I'll show you my sideboard here. We cut 2 Thoughtseizes. This is kind of a grindy game, and drawing a Thoughtseize late in a grindy game is terrible, so you want to cut Thoughtseize usually. I cut that and brought in 2 Grafdigger's Cage, as that this lets them turn off unearthing their abilities. Other than that, that's all we had. I didn't think anything else was super great against them. White Orchids aren't super great. Wrath of the Skies, I could see if you think Frog's going to get out of hand, but I feel like we have enough between 4 Fatal Push, 4 Solitudes, and things like that. We're doing okay. Now we have 3 Aven Interrupters. I don't think that's where we want to be, and consigns aren't good here. So go ahead here and play first. I choose to play first. Unfortunately, we see it. Our first hand has no lands in hand. Our second hand here is also questionable. Again, I'm going to keep it as I don't want to mulligan much lower against a person who's probably playing Thoughtseize. This hand has a Surveil land if we want it, or we can go turn 1 Grafdigger's Cage or Relic of Progenitus. If we ever draw a way to into more lands, Ketramose with Relic will start drawing us more cards. We have a Fatal Push for their turn 1 Frog, turn 2 Frog, and an Ephemerate. So go ahead here and play Polluted Delta. I want to Surveil, try and find another land, so I risk them having a Thoughtseize. Unfortunately, they have it. I'll go ahead here and take Relic, which I guess if you think the game's going to go long enough that I get to Ketramose, that's a thing. We go Surveiling. We see a Bogart Trawler. We keep it because it's a land. We can't be picky. We play Grafdigger's Cage. Opponent has their own Frog. We go ahead here, Fatal Push. Our opponent pitches an Archon, and I assume they haven't read Grafdigger's Cage, and I'm completely wrong as they have an Emperor Bones here. So at this point, the match is pretty much over. Go ahead, so here, Surveil, see an Overlord. We really need to hit a Solitude here. The only card we hit, again, like I said, the deck kind of falls apart here for us towards the end. Again, I'm not trying to blame everything on variance. I'm not saying I play this deck perfectly either. But we needed to hit something good there, and we Overlorded, and all we hit was a Witch's Enchanter was our only target with that Veilmark. So, we hit another Relic and a bunch of lands, just all lands. So anyway, we'll continue on here. The game should end here. As you see, our opponent, it doesn't end the game here, but... So our opponent goes ahead here, plays a Psychic Frog instead of attempting their Emperor Bones, which is mind-blowing to me. So we draw a Solitude, we pitch the Solitude, we exile their Emperor Bones. We go ahead here, Ephemerate their Solitude to exile their Psychic Frog. So we stabilize the board somewhat. Our opponent has a removal spell for our Solitude. Our opponent's down to 2 cards in hand. We're also 2 cards, and we just keep drawing lands. Go ahead here and play Ketramose. Ketramose is 1 card from being turned on. I go Surveiling. See a Solitude, I bin it. We don't have a card to pitch to it. And then we draw our own Emperor Bones, which is pretty solid. Fortunately, our opponent has a Fatal Push before we get into beginning of combat, so we don't get to draw a card off Ketramose. Opponent now has 3 cards in hand, which is terrifying. We just have to pass as we draw another Ketramose. It is worth knowing Veilmark does flip this turn, and then we get our Ketramose bounced with Otawara. Our opponent takes another draw step and proceeds to concede the game. It's a little weird for them to bounce our Ketramose. I guess they don't want to bounce our Veilmark for us to replay it and get another card. But anyway, I'll see you back here for game 3.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, back here for game 3. I mean, kind of weird sideboard change. I cut 1 Witch's Enchanter. I kind of didn't see any Leyline of the Voids or anything like that, so I wasn't super scared of them. So I cut 1 Witch's Enchanter, and I had realized I had accidentally left in Dark Blast, which is not a great card. So I cut that and brought in 2 Aven Interrupters. I know it's kind of weird to bring an Aven Interrupter in on the draw versus the play. Probably should be in on the play. Our opponent keeps 7, we keep 7. Whereas a Frog, a Relic, and a Push, and unfortunately we have 2 Surveillance in hand again. But hopefully we can surveillance some good stuff here. I don't think we can put this back against the Thoughtseize deck. We have Graveyard Hate for against their deck, a Fatal Push for their Frog, and our own Frog. Opponent goes Surveilling here, likes the card that they see, keeps it on top. Unfortunately, we draw a land and play a Relic. Opponent passes back. I pass back. I'm not willing to jam our Frog into Counterspell. Our opponent goes Surveilling. Opponent passes back yet again. And I do mess up there. I did want to fetch end turn. Fortunately, I did miss that end step. Go ahead here and go Surveilling. Opponent goes Thought Scouring away. They do have a Born Oculus in play. In their graveyard, I'm sorry. End step, I go get a Hollowed Fountain, and I flash in our Phalia. Since we have 2 of them, I'm willing to throw the first one under the bus. Go ahead here and play an Emperor Bones. Just trying to exile their Oculus from their graveyard if they would let us. They obviously did not. Phalia goes attacking. We go ahead here, blink our Relic of Progendas just to reset it so we can exile more cards from their graveyard without having to pop it. Opponent goes Psychic Frog. I go Fetch Shocking, go jam another Phalia. And then we draw a Ketramose, which is great. Unfortunately, our opponent has Counterspell for it. The nice thing is that opens us up so we can go Fatal Push on our opponent's Frog. And then I don't know why I didn't attack there. Our opponent now has an Oculus in play, which is really unfortunate for us. Oculus is going to slowly start running over the game. So go ahead here, Relic. Make them exile card, draw a card off Ketramose. I go attacking. I exile the I'll pause this here. I go attacking with Phalia, so we can exile the Relic of Progendas, so we can draw another card off Ketramose. I attack. I know this is a chump attack. I'm going to go Ephemerate on Phalia. Let's just draw another card, and then Relic comes back. We can activate Relic again to draw another card. Unfortunately, our opponent has a kill spell for Phalia. Super unfortunate for us. Relic comes back. And then I just go ahead here and sack it to draw 2 cards. Fortunately, it's not looking too great for us. Then our opponent goes ahead here and hits us with a Harbinger, which I straight up did not play around Harbinger. They have no black mana at all, which kind of shocked me. I just didn't play around it. So we kind of get got here. It is worth noting our opponent's down to 1 card in hand, and there's still a chance since we have a 4/4 lifelinker, and we do have 1 black mana. So go ahead here, Jammer Frog. So at this point, it's not looking terrible, right? So the idea here is we have 4 cards in hand. If our opponent swings an Oculus, we can pitch 4 cards, and then give our Frog flying, block the Oculus, trade it off. If they swing with the other creatures, we block with a 4/4 lifelink and survive. And then our lands are turned back on, and we have a Frog in play, and it looks great for us. Unfortunately, we get trekked here yet again by Otawara. So anyway, not much we can do here. Like I said, if our opponent didn't have an Otawara here, we definitely stabilized, but it is what it is. So anyway, I'll see you back here for game 5.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
Here we are for match 5. We win the die roll. We go ahead here and keep. Again, this is one of those questionable hands, but I haven't been intending to keep them. They've been working out so far. So we have a turn 1 Surveil land. And the upside is we have a relic for graveyard hate. We have a frog if we hit a land, Emperor Bones, a Thaltes, and an Ephemerate. So I go ahead and keep this. Our opponent was on Scalding Tarn, Hollowed Fountain, looks like Jeskia again, and our opponent goes turn 1 Tamiyo. And I'm not sure exactly what I want to do here. I go Surveilling, find a Godless Shrine, we keep it. Go ahead here and play it. And we go ahead here and Thaltes. Let's go ahead here and rewind. See what our opponent had here. So we go ahead here and Thaltes. Our opponent has double Flame of Venor, Counterspell, Discharge, and a Path. So we go ahead here and take one of their Flame of Venors. Flame of Venor is a house with Tamiyo in play. So I go ahead here and Solitude the Tamiyo. This might be a little spewy, but they're stuck on lands. They only have 2 lands when I did this. So I don't want them to be able to go Tamiyo, attack, get a clue, sack clue end of turn, and get more looks at a land. I was trying to stifle them here. And that's my thought process here. So go ahead here, pitch Solitude, answer their Tamiyo. And then they do the line that was a very good line that I kind of overlooked, and they path their own Tamiyo to go get a 3rd land, which is a very solid play. What that does for them is it turns on their Flame of Venor. So now they can draw 2 cards, which is super great for them. I go ahead here and play Emperor Bones. They kind of mess up. They let me go to pre-combat, and I get to exile their Flame of Venor. Since they're on a Wizards list, I assume they have Snapcaster Mage, so they probably should have killed that before I went to beginning combat. Fortunately, we won't have another land. So at this point, I go ahead here and pass because I know they have a counterspell. They go ahead here, cast their Flame of Venor, and draw 2 cards. So at this point, the game's coming to an end. At this point, our opponent has 5 cards in hand, 4 lands, and we have 3 cards in hand with 2 lands. Like I said, I don't know if that first play there was correct with the Solitude, but like I said, I didn't want them too carried away. Our opponent then goes ahead and plays a Tamiyo, and at that point, I just go ahead and concede. We don't really have a good answer to this. I can't even go pitch exile because they have counterspell up. So I'll see you back here for the next game.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
Right back here for match 5, game 2 against our Jeskia opponent. So sideboard wise, I got 2 Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp is a solid card, but it's at sorcery speed, and I really don't like playing sorcery speed 3-mana things against our Jeskia opponent. So I cut them, and I cut a Dark Blast, and I brought in 3 Aven Mind Sensors. I'm sorry, Aven Interrupter. Too many Avens. So anyway, we get to go first here. First hand isn't super phenomenal, but we have a push for their turn 1 Tamiyo, turn 2 Emperor Bones, followed up by Ketramose, and then 2 Surveil lands. Us drawing these Surveil lands has been super unfortunate. We see another push. We don't want another push. Just 1 for any possible Tamiyos. Go Surveilling, see an Overlord of Bailmark. We go ahead and keep that one. Opponent goes Tune the Narrative. Passes back. So go ahead here, player land tapped, and just pass back. I don't really want to jam anything into open mana. Opponent goes Surveil, puts a land on the bottom. They have Tamiyo, so we can push it end of turn. They let it go. Play another land. At this point, I decide I'm going to jam something. They only have 2 mana up. Hopefully they counter our Emperor Bones, and then we can resolve the Bailmark. So I do go Counterspell, and then we do attempt to resolve the Bailmark. Does resolve. We'll go ahead here, get back a Psychic Frog. We hit 2 Psychic Frogs and a Witch Enchanter. Opponent's passing back yet again. Play a land. And I just pass. I'm not willing to jam anything into open mana. Unfortunately, our opponent has a Wear Tear end of turn. Our opponent is stuck in 4 lands. We go surveilling, see another land. We pitch the land. We troll a land. And at this point, I'm starting to think we're flooding out too much. So I'll go ahead here, jam a frog. I get spell snared. I was considering conceding here. But then our opponent does something weird and taps out for Flage. If they hadn't did this, I wouldn't have conceded on spot, but it's getting to a point with our hand that this game was coming to an end. If you don't know, our deck's really good against like Dimir Frog and Frogtide and things like that in Boros, but we were terrible against energy or any type of control deck. So anyway, since they topped out, I was thinking we were lucky, right? So they tapped out, and I thought it was going to be great because we could go Ketramose into Bogart Trawler to exile their graveyard in their Flage and draw a card and develop a board. Unfortunately, they have Orum's Chant, which is it's good here. We'll see how it does. With that said, it's a card out of their hand, and they have 2 cards in hand. And then they bring back their Flage. And things are definitely starting to get rough for us. So go ahead here and attempt to hard cast a Solitude. And of course our opponent has yet another counter spell. Let's go fetching just to thin the deck. We draw a Witch Enchanter, which is amazing. We go Ketramose, and then we Bogart Trawler them. Drawing yet another Ketramose. These draws have not been kind to us. Go ahead here, ping our Bogart Trawler, which they have to do, because if they don't hit our Bogart Trawler, we double block and kill their Flage. I go ahead here and block with Ketramose. Our opponent has a Flame of Venor to draw 2 cards. At this point, again, we're in a rough spot, but we do get lucky and we rip another Frog. We jam Frog. We need to resolve. Somehow it resolves. And if this hadn't happened, this game was definitely coming to an end. So I'll go ahead here and I start drawing cards. Our opponent goes Galvanic Discharge on the Frog in response to our first trigger, and I just go all in, giving it flying. I exile more and more cards, and I eventually stop leaving us. I don't want to exile good cards from our graveyard, so I left an Emperor of Bones, an Overlord, a Psychic Frog, and a Solitude. So we could have drawn one more card here. I didn't think it was worth it. We were already going up to 6 cards here. I jam an Emperor Bones, go ahead and get back Solitude with our Emperor Bones. I adapt the Emperor Bones to get back to Solitude to exile their Flage, and then we go attacking. So as you can see, this just completely turned the game around. Frog with Ketramose. So now we went from 3 cards in hand to discarding cards for turn. Opponent has to go Flame of Venor. They do have the Tamiyo. But at this point, the game's kind of over. We just need to make sure we don't overextend somehow. I'll go ahead here and attack to the Tamiyo. Go ahead here and jam our Balemark. Go ahead and return to Solitude. Go ahead and play a Frog. We pass the turn. I did forget to play a land there. Our opponent does have Wrath of the Skies, which is super solid against us. Again, it's wild to me that can kill our Balemarks. With that said, I go ahead here end of turn. I flash in the Thalia and the Ketramose. Ketramose can kill Tamiyo by itself, but I just want to get the Thalia into play. With that said, in hindsight here, I could just go attacking. It might have been correct of me to have played another card just to blink it with Thalia. Like played an, I don't know what I could have played here. I guess it wouldn't have been great because we have even Mind Sensor. But anyway, I was going to say if we could play another card to blink it with Thalia, we could have got another card draw. But anyway, our opponent has Celestial Purge. We go Aven Interrupter because we really want to get that Tamiyo off the board. Tamiyo goes down. Opponent has 0 cards in hand. So it's looking pretty solid for us. Our opponent draws another card. They just go Surveilling. And they keep a card on top, which is slightly terrifying. We draw yet another land. I think we're almost out of fetchables. I think we have 1 or 2 fetchables left. I do blink the Aven Interrupter just to get another card draw. Unfortunately, it's another land. It's also worth noting it didn't really change the clock at all with us blinking the Aven Interrupter. Opponent goes ahead and draws 2 cards. So we do have one more fetchable. We have a swamp left. So go ahead here, playing our Ketramose. Opponent has a counter spell, so they are slowly stabilizing, but I don't think it'll matter here. Go attacking, get them for 5. They're down to 4. And we go to combat. They path to exile. So it's worth noting here, I guess it doesn't really matter, but Failure is legendary. I don't know if you want to path our legendary creature or if you would rather just hit our non-legendary creature. I think there's a good discussion to be had there. Like, Failure turns on any future Ketramoses, but at the same time, if I have another one in hand, I can't cast it. So anyway, they pass here. We flash in a Failure. And then even if they have a removal spell here, which they do, they still die. And our opponent is sinking the Stupor, but we have an Aven Interrupter here. And then we do get the win. So we'll see you back here for the third and final game.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, here we are for the third game. We're on the draw. Unfortunately, we went from all lands to no lands. So we mulligan. We go down to 6 here. Our opponent keeps a 7-land hand. His hand is playable, so we go ahead here and keep it. So go ahead here, just pass back. They go surveilling. They surveil land into the yard. They play a Hall of the Storm Giants. We also go surveilling. We see Overlord Baelmerk, so we keep it. Now we just pass back. Again, I don't want to be jamming anything into open mana. Our opponent goes to Fairy Time Reveler. This card has not seen play in a very long time. I'm not trying to be rude, but this card is basically not playable anymore. I don't know. It's weird that it's brought in against us, if that makes sense. I guess it dampens a couple of our cards, but like Failure and Solitude are instant speed creatures. I guess Aven Interrupter, which I got hosed by last game, I guess. But yeah, it was a weird card. I'll go ahead here, flash in our Failure. I know they get to bounce it back, but at least we get it down to 1. So here's the play. To be honest with you, this kind of this play here just kind of kills me in the end. So we go ahead here and we go Thoughtseize. We see their hand. Their hand is Flame of Venor, Counterspell, 3 lands, and a Spell Snare. So we take the Flame of Venor. And we take Flame of Venor because we're going to jam our Frog. And then since they bounced last turn with Time Raveler, we can attack it down next turn, draw the card, and they're bricked up on reactive spells. So all we need is them not to draw a removal spell in 1 draw step. I'm sure, as you can tell by my voice and sarcasm, you know what happens here. But I think that's the correct play there. So like I said, we jam the Frog, and we're in a phenomenal place if they don't hit a removal spell. But we're playing Jeskia, and our luck has not been super stellar. So I'm sure you can see what's going to happen. For extra rubbins, we draw the Ephemerate. I pitch 1 card, and our opponent goes Galvanic Blast. And that's pretty much the game there. I did want to see here in hindsight, I had what? I had 4 cards. So I guess I could have went all in on the Psychic Frog there. I didn't think that was a winning line. Because they had 1, they could have did 4 damage. So I could have pitched 4 cards. I could have pitched my entire hand. And try and keep my Frog around. But I did not. I play a Failure. Obviously hits the Spell Snare. Pass back. So we know our opponent has a counterspell. There's not a whole lot we can do here. We jam the Overlord. They hit the counterspell. So our opponent's down to 2 cards in hand. One of them should be 2 cards in hand. One's at least a land. So you have another Failure. Unfortunately, we're just drawing mediocre cards at this point. Our opponent hits a Snapcaster Mage, and I concede here. So we ran... I don't know. You can take that for how you want. it just felt kind of bad that our opponent had to hit that one of, and it wasn't a one of, but they had to hit a removal spell in one draw step where I think we're stabilizing pretty well. Unfortunately, it is what it is. So anyway, we end up here going 2-3. Deck still feels good. I just think it does have issues. You're not like blue. You can't smooth your draws or draw like tons of extra cards at instant speed or have card selection. And we didn't run Aether Vials either, so that's another thing to think about, is if Aether Vial was good or not. But anyway, I'll talk about that in the post review.
Is the one, the saying of legend.
All right, here we are for a real quick recap. In recap, I think this deck's still fun. I think it's definitely still very well positioned. We didn't play any Team of Breach, which I would like to get some games in against. The matchups we did lose, we lost to, Dimir Frog. I think that's normally, based on statistics, a very good matchup for us. We just ran pretty awful there against them. Jeskia can tend to be a rough matchup for us. Obviously, it's a control deck, and we're playing all creatures, so control decks tend to be very good against us. With that said, I don't think Jeskia is super well positioned right now. As for the main deck, I don't think I changed a whole lot, right? Like I said earlier, I would like to probably get another of Emperor Bones into the main deck. And this Dark Blast is cute because you can do the combo, like I had said, with Ketramose, Frog, and Dark Blast. But I'm not sure if that's worth it. Just so you know, if you don't know, what happens is you can give Psychic Frog flying. Ketramose triggers to draw a card with Dark Blast in your graveyard. You can mill 3 cards, return Dark Blast to your hand. You can pitch it to Frog to give it flying. Give it +1/+1. Then the 3 cards you milled off of Dark Blast Dredge, you exile to give it flying, which triggers Ketramose again. You can just do the loop. As long as you have life, that's how big you can make your Frog. I don't think there's a whole lot of change here. Thought Seizes did feel better than our Spell Snares. And then sideboard wise, I didn't think it was too hateful either. I mean, sideboard's pretty well positioned in my opinion. Even Mind Sensor's questionable. As you saw, it was pretty good. I know some people are on or off this. Consign to Memory is just a house. We didn't get to use it a ton, as we didn't play Eldrazi, but it is around, and it is a bad matchup for us. So in conclusion, I think the deck's good. I don't own this deck in paper. I'm missing the Ketramoses at Balemerks. But I like this deck enough. I think I'm actually going to go ahead and pick these cards up, as I like to play them in paper. With that said, I've been playing Esper Frogtide. Deck has been doing very well for me. I think my current record's 20 wins. I've had 2 losses. One on Moto just was really bad, and one against Burn for the first time last evening in paper. Very close matchup, but with no life gain in the deck, it's a rough matchup. And then one draw, I split topping with a person. So I still like Esper Frogtide. I know some people say it's not great, but I think you being Esper, you get a lot better sideboard options. But anyway, like I said, I think this deck's great. It's super fun. You'll probably see me play it again, as I want to get a couple reps in with it and truly decide if the Balemerks and Ketramoses are worth the, $200-300 for me to pick up. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Is the one, the saying of legend.